I'm so excited to be back. Can't wait to be out on court, and I hope to see you there.
Of course, we have to mention Alex Eala, the incredible fandom coming, across the globe, especially from the Filipino community. So
now we came here because she's also here, of course.
Membership verification required at the time of ticket purchase, with organizers making no public statement about how they plan to manage what has become one of the most disruptive fan bases women's tennis has experienced in years. Martina Navratilova went on Tennis Channel in January and openly criticized the Australian Open.
I'm just so happy and so thankful to my team who's been taking care of me so much.
For scheduling Eala on Court 6, while hundreds of her supporters were lined up all the way back to Rod Laver Arena, unable music to get inside. That criticism was broadcast, recorded, and ultimately ignored. And now a tennis analyst is calling out the Linz Open for deliberately preventing Alex Eala's Filipino fan base from filling the stands. And the structural evidence is overwhelming, with Renee Stubbs describing this fan surge as a good problem during Indian Wells.
Conference in Forest Hills, that's when I famously said I want to be #1. Little did I know that I would...
A YouTube video covering the entire 2026 tournament shows how major events are cashing in on her popularity, while Linz caps attendance at 2,500 and restricts entry behind paperwork that international fans can't realistically navigate. The prize money keeps flowing while her fan base is locked out, and the message is clear. Subscribe now for deep tennis analysis the establishment would rather you ignore, because the full breakdown of how this restriction works starts now. The Linz Open is a 3-5-year-old tournament, and its main court at the Design Center Linz holds around 2,500 spectators. To put that into perspective, Eala's pre-tournament press conference at the Australian Open in January drew 196,000 live views, while Aryna Sabalenka, a 3-time Australian Open champion and world #1 at the time, drew 9,000 on the same day. The math behind what's happening in Austria this week is simple. A player generating Grand Slam-level digital attention has been placed inside a small regional venue, and fans traveling from Vienna, Brussels, and across the Filipino diaspora in Central Europe are being squeezed into a space built for a completely different scale of demand. This is not the first time the system has failed her supporters. At the 2026 Australian Open, Alex Eala made her main draw debut against Alicia Parks on Court 6. A mid-sized court at Melbourne Park, far from the tournament's premier stadiums, the line stretched back toward Rod Laver Arena, and hundreds of fans who came specifically to watch her never made it inside. Filipino flags, chanting, and an atmosphere rarely seen for a first-round match featuring an unseeded player all collided inside a court that simply couldn't handle the demand. Martina Navratilova, speaking from the Tennis Channel studio, did not hold back, saying organizers need to consider where players are from and the actual size of their fan base, emphasizing the massive Filipino audience in Melbourne and across Australia, and urging better scheduling decisions in the future. Lindsay Davenport went even further, stating Eala should have been placed on a larger show court, calling her one of the most prominent athletes ever to come out of the Philippines, and pointing to the overwhelming number of fans waiting outside. That was January 19, and now it's April 6, and Navratilova's message clearly wasn't meant for Melbourne alone.
Press conference in Forest Hills, that's when I famously said I want to be #1. Little did I know that I would,
They were a warning to every tournament on Eala's schedule moving forward, and Linz did not listen. What makes the Linz Open's deliberate restriction of Alex Eala's Filipino fanbase even worse than Melbourne is the combination of factors. Court 6 at the Australian Open was a scheduling mistake within a Grand Slam that has massive alternative infrastructure. But the Design Center Linz is the entire venue. There is no larger court to relocate her to mid-tournament. If organizers suddenly acknowledge the demand, the capacity is capped at 2,500 and it cannot be expanded. When members of the Filipino community in Vienna, Munich, and Zurich, key diaspora hubs near Linz, try to purchase tickets, they face a registration system requiring an OTV Tennis Federation license or a regional newspaper card as documentation. These are Austria-specific credentials, and a Filipino fan traveling from Germany or Italy to watch Eala has no realistic way to obtain them in time, meaning the barrier doesn't just limit entry, it effectively blocks them before they even book a flight. Now, consider what Eala represents commercially. During the 2026 Indian Wells, the BNP Paribas Open posted a day-in-the-life video featuring her that reached 94,000 views, making it the most watched piece of content across the entire tournament that year, by a wide margin. Indian Wells is one of the most prestigious events outside the Grand Slams, and consistently features the biggest names in the sport. Yet Eala, ranked in the 30s at the time, was drawing practice crowds comparable to Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner, with reports of Filipino fans traveling hours across Southern California specifically to see her. Andy Roddick assessed the situation and called it the kind of story the sport should embrace because it benefits tennis as a whole, while Novak Djokovic was even asked about the operational challenges created by the surge in her fan base.
Yeah, I mean, it's just otherworldly stuff from him, and you really can't be surprised.
They called it a good problem to have. These are some of the sport's most respected voices, and they are in agreement, yet the Linz Open has made no public effort to demonstrate it understands the difference between genuinely accommodating a fan base and merely tolerating one. The tournament has issued no expanded ticketing updates, offered no guidance for overflow seating for fans unable to secure spots, and made no acknowledgement that the woman in its main draw is simultaneously one of the most commercially valuable attractions it has ever hosted. Eala enters this week ranked 45th in the world, defending just 67 clay court ranking points from her entire 2025 European swing.
Alex is someone I get along very well with on and off the court. Again, another physical battle, but
She closed out that stretch with a 2-win, 4-loss record across 4 tournaments, bowing out in the opening round at Roland Garros and the round of 64 inches Madrid. The clay season remains genuinely challenging for her, yet none of that lessens the impact her presence has on ticket sales, digital engagement, and the social media reach of a WTA 500 event that, without her in the draw, would struggle to gain traction beyond Austrian tennis circles. The bigger picture is what analysts are really criticizing. This is not a one-off venue issue in a single Austrian city. It is a recurring structural failure across the entire tour. The WTA benefits from Eala's market appeal at every level. Her ranking points feed into the same prize money pool. Her matches drive broadcast streaming figures and fan interaction, boosting the tournament's global social media performance. Yet the administrative framework consistently falls short in accommodating the real-world impact of her fan base when she competes.
But we just saw the greatest match ever the greatest match between the two best heads of hair ever on a tennis court.
At Melbourne, the Australian Open recorded a single-day attendance peak of 101,696 spectators on the day of her first-round match. The tournament set an attendance record while her supporters were left standing outside on the pavement, unable to enter the court. Eala has spoken thoughtfully about what her fan base means to her. After her victory over Clara Tauson at the 2025 US Open, the first Grand Slam main draw win by a Filipino player in the Open era, she said, "Being Filipino is something I take immense pride in. I don't have a home tournament, so having this community here makes me feel so grateful, like I'm at home." That lack of a home tournament is an important context. Unlike a Spanish player at Madrid or a French player at Roland Garros, Eala has no WTA event designed around her fan base's ability to attend. The Philippine Women's Open, launched in January 2026 as a WTA 125 event in Manila, was the closest approximation, but it is at the lowest tier of the professional circuit. At every WTA 500 and WTA 1000 event on her calendar, she operates within someone else's logistical framework, and that system is not adapting quickly enough. What could Linz have done differently?
Hi everyone, I'm so excited to be back. Can't wait to be out on court and I hope to see you there.
At Melbourne, the Australian Open recorded a single-day attendance peak of 101,696 spectators on the day of her first-round match. The tournament set an attendance record while her supporters were left standing outside on the pavement, unable to enter the court. Eala has spoken thoughtfully about what her fan base means to her. After her victory over Clara Tauson at the 2025 US Open, the first Grand Slam main draw win by a Filipino player in the Open era, she said, "Being Filipino is something I take immense pride in. I don't have a home tournament, so having this community here makes me feel so grateful, like I'm at home." That lack of a home tournament is an important context. Unlike a Spanish player at Madrid or a French player at Roland Garros, Eala has no WTA event designed around her fan base's ability to attend. The Philippine Women's Open, launched in January 2026 as a WTA 125 event in Manila, was the closest approximation, but it is at the lowest tier of the professional circuit. At every WTA 500 and WTA 1000 event on her calendar, she operates within someone else's logistical framework, and that system is not adapting quickly enough. What could Linz have done differently?
So we've just seen Alex Eala get through Coco Gauff in...
I'm eager to see how this will play out this year. Her 2025 clay court results clearly highlighted that gap. She is not entering Linz as the favorite. The draw is led by world number 13 Ekaterina Alexandrova and includes Grand Slam champions Jelena Ostapenko and Emma Raducanu. It is a genuinely competitive field where Eala's path will be challenging. The stakes are real, and the outcome is uncertain for fans who flew to Austria, refreshing the ticket portal and calculating whether the OTV documentation requirement can be met in time. The question has never been about whether she wins the title. Simply getting through the door was the first hurdle, and Linz created that obstacle without apology. Martina Navratilova set the public standard in Melbourne, reinforced by Lindsay Davenport on the same broadcast. Andy Roddick framed the phenomenon as a gift to the sport, while Novak Djokovic recognized the logistical disruption as a feature, not a flaw. The expert critique of the Linz Open doesn't come from ignorance of how tournaments operate. It comes from people who understand the system precisely and can pinpoint exactly where organizational decisions diverge from both commercial logic and basic fairness. Eala's Filipino army isn't seeking sympathy, just a seat inside the venue. The Linz Open, operating at 2,500 capacity with a restrictive ticketing system and no public outreach to the sport's most passionate traveling fan base, has made its stance clear without saying a word. The clay season is just beginning. Madrid follows Linz. Roland Garros follows Madrid. Every tournament director on that calendar is observing how this week unfolds, watching whether the crowd outside the design center becomes a story, whether social media pressure mounts, and whether the WTA provides any guidance. The real question in Linz this week is not whether Eala can win on clay for the first time at this level. The real question is whether the sport's institutions are capable of catching up to what she has already become. If you've followed this far, you already know this conversation is bigger than a single tournament in Austria. The Linz situation is a case study in how professional tennis handles or mishandles the commercial and cultural significance of a generational talent with a global fan base. Subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a breakdown when the next flashpoint hits the clay swing. Share your thoughts in the comments. Should the WTA set venue standards for high-demand players, or should this remain the responsibility of individual tournament organizers? Share this with anyone following Eala's clay season, because the wider this discussion spreads, the harder it becomes for the sport to ignore. More is coming, stay tuned.